Actually, it's Lori Barfield, and the talk is on Reborn and IT. That is, uh, the Reborn is the term that we're using to describe people that have this crazy dream where they want to come from somewhere else besides IT or make a big career change from within IT. So a little bit about me. I started out in computing when I was 21 years old as a programmer, and I've been in the aerospace industry, the computer game industry, the ISP industry, the Hollywood industry, the startup industry since then. In the process of my career, the companies I've worked for and the industries I've worked in have been, some of them have gone through really major changes. And as a result, I had to recareer. And the painful lessons that I learned while doing that and how the standard wisdom out there can really trip people up really stayed with me. And that's what I want to share with you, is how to make your dreams come true without falling into the same pits I did. In my time as I've been an engineer and a hiring manager and executive, but all along, as I've been part of the hiring process, I've always been known as a hiring contrarian. And that's because I believe we're doing it wrong. And I'm going to prove it. So what is recareering? Changing your career trajectory means that you've started off on one path and you decided that you'd rather do something else. Something else is going to spark your fancy, or it's a passion, or it's a second career you want after retiring from your first one. The magnitude of the change you're making, the lateral move that you're making, or the jump that you're making, will determine the level of effort you need to put in to develop your qualifications and make your case. You might be going from one field to another. You might have a fine arts degree, but what you really want to do is system administration. You might be looking for a new vertical, new role. Maybe you're an engineer and you want to be a manager and you're having trouble breaking through that. Or maybe you're returning after taking time off work to raise children or take care of a family member. All of these are recareering situations, and all of them are special because it's not as easy as just trying to find another job. So the reason why recareering is hard is also the reason why HR is doing their job very well. HR people manage their jobs and their workloads just as well as engineers do. And what do good engineers do on a team? You develop process and procedure, specifically repeatable processes. You do your work modularly so you can hand off to other people. You try to homogenize your inputs and your outputs so to reduce risk and make sure that as few mistakes will be made as possible, right? Well, HR people do exactly the same thing. Unfortunately, what that does for us as team builders is that tends to make all of the candidates look alike. All of the job descriptions have a similar sound. All of the career paths look very regularly stratified. And that's not really how teams work. That's not how companies grow. And the best teams, the most resilient teams, the teams with the most ability to adapt are the diverse teams. So it's actually self-defeating that this is what our HR practices are like. So here's one slide. This is particularly for hiring managers. I want to give you the language that you need to justify hiring reborns, to justify hiring people who didn't go to college for a computer science degree and immediately start working on their intended career path right after college. Here are ways that they represent great advantages to your team. They're going to be lower cost during the ramp-up period. Now, they're going to take junior roles, but they're not junior people. They've had a previous profession or a previous job where they've gotten skills and training, and you're not paying for any of that. You're also not waiting for any of that maturing. Every team also, especially engineering team, has at least one guy that's kind of this jack of all trades. A lot of times you'll find somebody recareering from another industry is that exact kind of person that you can use. They may not know exactly the technology or the skills that you need on the team, but they're the one most likely to have a lot of fun figuring it out. Also, reborns tend to have a mentoring mindset because they just come from recent training. And they're more willing to get certifications. In some cases, you might wait 10 years for the guys on your team to finish getting some of the certs that you've been pushed on to get. And a reborn will be the one guy that will be glad to do it for you. Also, reborns, having gone through the recareering process, their soft skills will be much stronger. Having been recently honed with interviews and trying to explain to people from outside the industry what their strengths are. And they'll take those tough to fill positions. Every engineering manager that's been around for any amount of time has that one job that they just can't get anybody to call back on, or they get a bunch of resumes that are off the mark, or they finally get a candidate in to interview and they never respond to the offer letter. Or someone comes in and for 30 days they suck up training cycles and then they quit. And it makes you look like nobody wants to work for you. Well, this is a great position to target for Reborn and communicate to your HR department that you're happy to look for creative qualifications for unconventional candidates. They don't have to fit exactly what the company standard would be for that particular stratum. And also, hiring managers, there are returnship programs out there put out by some very esteemed companies, and you can borrow the language right from their websites and their marketing materials. IBM has a returnship program that targets females that are returning to the workforce after raising kids. Sorry, guys. Also, Microsoft has a recareering program for veterans that are looking for information security roles. So there's 4 aspects to recareering where you can fall into pits. Let's try to give you some hints for all these. Building up your qualifications. So there's 2 kinds of qualifications that go on a resume. And all too often the only ones engineers include are conventional qualifications because they think the other ones don't matter. But the other ones can not only matter as much, but they can be even more important because they prove how good a fit you are for a role. Not just that you have a skill, but that you are going to fit on the team in a way that you can grow with it for years to come. So let's start with conventional qualifications, though. These are things that were very familiar to us. The most common and the most intuitive thing that people do to get new qualifications to change their careers is they lean over in the current role. That means they look at the other jobs around the company where people are doing what they want to do and they try to pick up those tasks. An extra project here and there. If you're a programmer and you'd like to do some network engineering work, maybe you'll work on a project that's related to that. If you want to write software and you do system administration, maybe you'll do some automation, right? You lean over as close as you can. And then on your resume, in that experience block, you put those new tasks, those pertinent tasks at the top, and you emphasize them. So those become the first thing you talk about in the job interview when you're talking about that role, and it's the thing that they remember the most. And your other responsibilities, while significant, would go down below, and you would de-emphasize the work you don't want to do anymore. Casual consulting on 1099, this is independent contract work, which you can do without being a full-time employee. So there's no chicken and egg. How do I get this new job if I hadn't already had that job before? It goes on your resume just like any other full-time job. Only you specify the parameters. It was a 3-month effort. I did this work on a team. Here's what we accomplished. College degree certificate programs and industry and vendor certifications are all expensive ways to also build your conventional qualifications. And sometimes they're absolutely necessary for if you are targeting certain companies. But, I'm sorry. And here are, so I have on the slide, it's in parentheses up there because this is mostly for the slide deck. I have these spelled out in the slides, but there isn't really enough time to talk about everything. These are really common DevOps-related, system administration-related certifications that you see on resumes. Unconventional qualifications goes a little bit outside the box. Very important if you're recruiting because they prove how much you're qualified to actually make a change. Conventional qualifications don't account for character. So the 2 most important, or the most common that I see, are volunteer work, open source. You're not compensated for volunteer work, and so people think it shouldn't go on a resume. But actually, volunteer work, you can spell it out just the same as any other experience block on your resume with your responsibilities and your accomplishments. And if you're trying to take on engineering work and having trouble getting paid for it, say as an independent consultant, you can look for nonprofit companies looking for volunteers on LinkedIn by sorting by nonprofit. Also, open source. As a hiring manager, I can vouch for the fact that there is nothing more compelling than finding an open source entry on someone's resume because you can just follow the link and confirm what their skill set is, what their contribution to the team is, how well they interact with the community. It takes so much of the risk out of hiring somebody. I would rather see an open source reference than other conventional qualifications myself. And these other categories, if you can't even find work to do for free in your passion, the thing you want to do for a living next, well, you can set up a slide deck and go speak at a user group. Meetup.com is a great place to look if you're almost anywhere in the United States. And again, you put the link on your resume. The hiring manager can follow the link and confirm this person really has this expertise. Also, online skill builder sites will have little certificate programs and things. Some are expensive and some are free. And then also, many of our IT disciplines nowadays have a security element. Even ones that didn't have it before. Even if you're a DBA nowadays, you need to understand security, right? So if you want to add a security credential or qualification to your resume, you can engage in competitions. That is considered very highly respected. We capture the flag competitions at security events, and they're almost always free. Second aspect of recareering is job hunting. It's very important not to listen to the conventional wisdom out there because it's wrong and it's going to trip you up. It works maybe for job hunters that are on a very linear path, but that's not going to be you. So how do you tell if a piece of advice you have is the reason why you're not getting calls back or the reason that you're not getting job offers? Well, we need to analyze each step that's taken in the job hunting process. And if in looking at the purpose of each step in the process, it sounds like a piece of advice is actually not in line with that, then you should probably abandon that and take a new tack. So what's the first step in the job hunting process? Write a resume, right? That's your first step. But what's the purpose of a resume? Most people don't even think about this. Purpose of a resume is to get a call back. The second thing a resume does is it serves as a table of contents in your job interview, but the first purpose of a resume is to get a call back. So if you're sending out a bunch of resumes and nobody's calling you back, what does that tell you? Your resume has to change. It doesn't matter if it's a work of art, if it's great, if it's complete. If people would only take the time to read it, they would understand what a great candidate you are. If you're not getting calls back, it's not working. You need to rip it up and start over again. Now, the purpose of a call back is to get an interview. So if you're stuck where people are calling you but not bringing you in for an interview, we need to examine where you're sending your resume, what kinds of jobs you're responding to. What's the purpose of an interview? Purpose of an interview is for both parties to get to know each other so that you can enter into a well-understood negotiation. Both parties getting to know each other. It is bi-directional. What's the purpose of a negotiation? To be able to write an offer letter that's going to satisfy the needs of both parties, or to iteratively enter in the offer letter process. Okay? So it's in series. If you're stuck at some point along this way, you just need to look at this previous step and figure out what's going wrong. So, dogma about resumes, dogma about interviews. Here's where people get stuck. Again, I'm contrarian. Some of you will disagree with me. I respect that. And I'll try to get through this quickly so we can have some people come up to the microphone and actually disagree with me out loud. Okay, so here are all the things I disagree with about resumes. And for those of you taking pictures, the slides will be available, and there's a lot more detail in some cases. Okay, because I'll skip some things so that you can have it just on the slides. Exact length of a resume. How many people know how long a resume should be? 1 page. I have 2 pages? But I did hear someone say the right answer. As long as it needs to be. Now, this is something I run into all the time as a hiring manager when people are trying to cram data into 1 page or 2 pages and they're using an 1/18 of an inch margin and tiny fonts and it doesn't sound anything like them, so you can't get a sense of who they are. This is very distracting. How long should a book be? How long should a book be? As long as it takes to tell the story. Exactly. If you take all of the information out of the resume that doesn't belong, that doesn't prove that you would be a good candidate for a particular role, and you emphasize the things that actually make your case, you're going to find out your resume is exactly the length it needs to be. The strategy for producing a resume that's excellent, for producing a resume that's exactly the right length the first time you do it, is to have a master resume where you put all of your career information on it. Everything to your paper route all the way back to age 12. everything. All of your accomplishments, even your academic stuff, your publications, put it in there. Get it all out. That's your book report. Because the resume that you're going to create out of those, the targeted resumes, are going to be specifically modified to match a job description. You're not going to blitz people with 100 identical resumes. 15, thank you. So general, a lot of times people, they don't want to discourage anybody. So their resume, they'll say, I'll do just about anything. That is a bad idea, and let me tell you why. Because hiring managers want to know that you want the job. They want to know that you're going to stay at it for a while. Okay? If the resume doesn't tell me what you don't want to do for a living, what company you don't want to work for, what industry you don't want to be in, I'm not going to be persuaded that you actually want my role and that you're a good fit. So in the resume at the very top, there should always be a summary section that explains the industry you want to work for, the type of company you want to work for. Maybe it's a big, well-established company. Maybe it's a small company that's more startup, so you get more challenges. It should talk about the role on the team you want. Do you want to be a senior mentor? Do you want to be a junior guy that gets mentoring? And it should talk about the kind of work you want to do. Well, as a hiring manager, I can tell you most resumes, I'm lucky if I just figure out what kind of work they want to do. That's only 1 out of 4 to determine if someone's a good fit. Buzzwords and acronyms. We're going to go through the rest of these a little faster. This is a mistake. People put a bunch of crap on their resumes that doesn't mean anything. Prioritize by the work you want to do the most, the buzzwords and acronyms that actually apply to the work that you want to do next, and leave the other crap out, no matter what the recruiters tell you. You don't need every certification in the world. You need the ones that apply, especially if they're part of your strategy. You can have too many certifications. Unless you're an instructor, you don't need 10 certifications. Because what hiring managers look for is alternating academic or vocational accomplishments and professional accomplishments. We look for the master's degree and then the promotion to the new role. If you don't have a balance of both, you're not as good a candidate. Blitz. How many people have sent out dozens of resumes at the same time? One person. Okay. So this is a piece of conventional wisdom. Just send it out to everybody. But if you're recareering and you have a resume that nobody's giving you calls back on, if you blitzed everybody, what have you just done? You saturated all of your best leads with a version of the resume that doesn't work. Using formulaic section titles, get creative with your resume. If you have unconventional qualifications, create a category that's just for here's my community. Here are my community events that I've been involved in. Here's the volunteer work I've done for my daughter's school. You can make your own sections up. As long as they prove the case that that makes you more qualified for this new role, you're right on target. Employment gaps will make people apologize in a job interview, and I want to turn that around. If you find yourself feeling like an employment gap is a downside on your resume, you just need to work harder on turning that around and applying it to make you sound like someone who adapts to new situations. If you took off a couple of years and in that time you recharged your worker bee batteries and you earned a certificate and you went to a bunch of user groups and you learned how to do a particular new kind of technology, then that goes on your resume in a whole block as if it was a whole job. And that is a really persuasive case to your next employer that you're the kind of person that's self-motivated, that knows what he wants to do for a living or she wants to do for a living, and you're willing to do what it takes in order to step up to some new discipline. Self-descriptions do not sell. This wisdom that self-descriptions will persuade me that you are a highly motivated self-starter, not only is that not persuasive, it's actually very distracting on a resume. Your resume should have a summary at the top, and everything else should prove that summary, should prove that you are qualified to do that thing that you want to do for a living. You don't need to describe yourself to me. And the last point I want to make here is the mentality that everyone exaggerates. This is terrible, especially people who are recareering and they don't understand how a new industry works, or junior people just coming out of college and don't have any industry experience. They get told everybody exaggerates. So if you don't, that other guy that's interviewing with you is going to get the job. You know, if you worked on 10 servers, say it was 50, right? If you had 30 users, say it was 300. Well, if you're recareering, this is a really good way to get tripped up quickly because the person across the table from you that you're interviewing with knows a lot more about the industry than you do. And also you can tell on someone's resume when they're exaggerating. The one thing people tend to do most often is they describe their boss's job. and you look at the role and you look at what they say was done on, it's usually pretty clear. It usually jumps out at you. Do not exaggerate on a resume. If you look at your resume and you feel like it is weak, you feel like it doesn't make your case, what do you need to do? Build up more conventional and unconventional qualifications until you feel like you've proven your case. So in the interest of time, we're going to go quick. Just to recap, resume development itself is a process with a purpose. You create your master resume, which actually helps solidify in your mind what the arc of your career has been. It teaches you about yourself and helps you decide what you want to do next. And then the essay approach is critical to make a resume that's readable, and it needs to be targeted to each individual role. These other items are on the slide deck. Okay. At interviews, some of the wisdom is going to throw you. Don't do this. You interview them. They don't interview you. You're a junior. You're going to need to compromise on salary if you're changing careers, but money is not what's important. You have a new dream. You want to do something new for a living. What you want is training and mentoring and challenges. You want someone who's going to give you the hard work to do even though you're brand new on the team. So you interview them. It's okay to ask a hiring manager, well, what is your training budget? How many people got certifications last year? When was the last time someone got to go to a conference on your team? Practice your interview answers until you can do short 30-second responses. Don't go negative, even if you've been laid off or if you've had time off. Remember, all of the things on your resume that may seem like a negative can also prove that you are a good candidate to be reborn into a new IT career. Making a case that avoids prejudices. Here's one I get asked about a lot. Okay, so there is a lot of prejudice out there in the IT industry, especially. It can be difficult. And hiring managers don't even know when they're engaging in prejudice. So here are the things to avoid, okay? If you're 45, 50, if you've got gray hair and you're trying to re-career into IT, don't talk about your boat. You can talk about your boat and invite them to come sailing with you anytime after they hire you. Don't walk into the interview and talk about things that you leave them with the impression that you're ready to retire, okay? Talk about leaving. If you talk about how disciplined you are, sometimes that's code for I leave at 5 p.m. every night. That means you're tired at the end of the day, right? Now, if you're a woman, now men don't have as much prejudice this way, but it can hurt everybody to be out of the workforce to raise kids. If you're a woman especially, and you're in an interview and you've been out of work for a few years, you know what happens. The state-of-the-art moves underneath you, and you're actually re-careering to get back in, even though you used to be on top of the world. Don't talk about your children. Do that at a different time. Show them the pictures of the baby later after you've gotten to know them. Managers, they never think that they're using prejudice, but it comes up for them. So don't challenge that. Okay? The one thing that's in the back of everybody's mind is she just going to leave right away to have another baby, right? And also, if you've taken off work because you were ill, you can just find other things to talk about at the time because you don't want to leave them with the impression that you're not well yet. Okay. Just quickly with this is in the slides. This is what's happened with the workforce in the United States. That red line is age 65 and up. On the left side is the year 2000, and that is as of August of 2018, and you see how the workforce is getting older. At the very bottom, we've got ages 16 to 24, the light blue line. Younger people are not working at as high a rate, and that's because they're going to college more. So older people have a better chance nowadays. Also on the slides, here are the jobs that are 2 times to 3 times more likely for baby boomers to take. Targeting roles and employers. There are returnship programs, as I mentioned, and you need to look for those stale job postings that haven't been filled. And the 3 industries in the United States that have the most employment are education and health, professional services, and manufacturing. So if you don't know where to start, but you kind of know what you want to do for a living, look in these 3 industries. They have the most jobs. Here is where you can get your intel before going to job interviews to figure out the inside scoop on the companies. Again, this is in the slides. And using community resources. Since you're in this meeting right now, you're already doing it. You're going to a conference and you're going to a talk where someone's trying to share their wisdom with you. That's what this talk actually came out of. Was 2 years ago, I co-founded a security conference in Southern California called ShellCon. And my contribution as the co-founder was to create a career development arm to the conference, which kind of took off and got a life of its own. And now I travel around and I do workshops and talks on career development. And ShellCon is the name of the conference, and RaiseMe is what the nonprofit effort is called. And there's a table in the back with some of the handouts. So if you're looking for help, this is another place to get some free help. And there we go. We have time for questions. If someone wants to come up and challenge me, tell me how wrong I am. References.
Hey, Laurie, that was very, very good. I just wanted to reiterate the last point you said regarding like being prepared to ask questions. I am a hiring manager. That's one of the things that really, really turned me off, which is you're interviewing them, and towards the end you ask like, do you have any questions for me? And they're like, not prepared at all. Like, I want somebody to ask, what's my day to day like? What does this company do? And the other thing I will say is like, whichever company you're applying for, take a moment, even if it's Wikipedia, just go and read about the company, like what they do, right?
There's one slide there that's a whole list. I didn't even list Wikipedia because it seems so obvious to me, but you're absolutely right. Remember that it's bidirectional. A job interview, you're interviewing them as much or more than they're interviewing you, because you're the one that's taking the chance, not them.
Mm-hmm. Because we have so many people applying, then sometimes you're like, who seems to be the most interested and will fit?
Right. Who stands out the most? Who wants the job the most?
Exactly.
The people that want the job the most are the ones that are going to stay the longest. Go ahead. Any disagree with me on something?
No, I wanted to follow up on something.
Okay.
Thanks for the talk. About the slide about avoiding triggering interviewers' prejudices.
Yes.
Do you have any advice for those of us who might be interviewing to help us avoid?
Yes. In fact, I gave this workshop yesterday. I have a whole workshop I give that makes an analytical exercise out of choosing the best candidate for a role. If you create a standard and you measure each candidate against the same written standard, that is analytical enough that it will help you overcome any subconscious prejudices. And we all have it, right? Where you realize you want one candidate more than another, and you ask yourself why. Sometimes there's a good reason. Because he's 10 minutes from work, that means with on-call, he'll be there in 10 minutes if I have an outage. That's a good reason. A bad reason is, he reminds me of the same guy I was when I was 20 in college. That's a bad reason, right? And creating an analytical process where you're evaluating candidates actually avoids that. I'll give you a copy of my worksheet if you want. Just see me afterward.
Great, thank you.
Okay, here we go. You can disagree with me.
This is more of a comment than a question.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. You talked about how general resumes are bad, and you want to be more specific to the field. Like, how specific do you want to get? Do you want to write a resume for each job?
I do a whole other talk on this a lot longer on resume development and what can help a hiring manager get to the essence of it right away. The 4 things. If you just narrow it down to 4 things, that's good enough. What industry do you want to be in? Or multiple industries. I'd like to be in the healthcare industry. Maybe that's where you came from, right? What industry you want to be in, what type of company you want to work for. I gave an example before. What role you want on the team. Maybe you want to be the senior mentor on the team. Maybe you want to be the junior guy that gets training, and the type of work that you want to do. Usually resumes only say what kind of work you want to do. And you're happy to, I'll sweep floors and answer the phone. It doesn't make you sound like a good match for anything. It's not intuitive, but that's true. Okay, is that it?
All right, let's give Laurie another round of applause.